That's a fun little back and forth, and Randy Mahomes with the hammer, Peter, because here's when you take your victory lap. You take it in February, which is what the Chiefs did, and which is what they may be doing again. But the Raiders have had something to say about it. The Raiders, the only team that has beaten the Kansas City Chiefs in the last calendar year. And it's actually bad news, I think, for the Raiders, because the one thing about the Chiefs this year, because they're taking the absolute best that every opponent has to offer every given week, and it's the Super Bowl for everyone they play, you have to get their full focus and attention to get the best out of them. And I think this week, I don't think you need the victory laps in the buses to do it. I think they already had the full focus and attention of the Chiefs, because the Chiefs don't want to get swept by a division rival, and they're going to do everything they can to go out there to Las Vegas and get the win, Peter.
Mike, in 36 years of covering the NFL, the one thing that I can tell you is that the stories that are in the headlines on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, most of them mean absolutely, totally nothing when the game starts. And I guarantee you, this might be an asterisky. I challenge you, and I challenge everybody who watches this to read all the stories about what is going to be a very big game, Monday and Sunday night. And I want to see how many people spend more than one sentence, with a snide aside to the victory lap. It's not going to be a factor. It's not going to mean anything. Andy Reid is not going to shake hands or fist bump or anything with John Gruden and say, bleepity bleep you for taking the victory lap. It just doesn't happen. It just doesn't really mean anything. But, it's fun to talk about, but I kind of agree with Derek Carr. Just play the game.
Let me ask you this, because the only reason this became a thing, and I wasn't even aware it had happened, it only became a thing because Andy Reid, in his first press conference of Raiders Week, said things that suggested he was perturbed by it. He could have shut the door on this by saying, come on, we don't care what they do in their bus. Why even, we don't care about that. They can take the bus wherever they want. But it became clear based on the way he answered the questions that he wasn't a fan of that. That's not what we do, and it was the reporters who were covering it that were sending out these tweets saying, oh, Andy Reid's upset about the victory lap. And that's when it got my attention. And, he really, and you have to wonder, is there a strategy? Is it something that happened in the moment? I don't know. But he could have ended this before it ever even became a thing if he just would have said, come on, guys, what are you talking about? Who cares what they do in their bus after they win the game?
Well, what can it hurt him to bring his players' attention to it? Really, if it, probably 30 guys in his locker room laugh it off and don't care. But what if Tyrann Mathieu gets genuinely ticked off by it? Or whoever it is. What if somebody gets genuinely ticked off about it and it causes them to say, okay, let's go. Come on, we got these guys. And whatever the motivating tool is, why not use it? All I'm saying is that it doesn't matter. I just don't think it matters, and I don't think it will play one scintilla of a factor when the game starts.
But Peter, you're being inconsistent, because it will matter if Tyrann Mathieu or 4 or 5 other guys decided from Monday, we're going to do everything we can. We're going to watch extra film. We're going to be extra careful about our nutrition. We're going to make sure we get extra sleep. That's the building blocks to having the performance on Sunday that makes the difference.
Then if that happens, then I will come on the show next week and say, hey, I was wrong. I doubt it happens.
My point is, there's never going to be a trail of breadcrumbs back to that. What you're saying is once it's time to play the game, all that matters is the game. But the performances that make a difference in the game may have had their foundation in how pissed off some of the guys maybe got when Andy Reid brought their attention to it. I'm just trying to harmonize how it doesn't matter and how it potentially does matter. And I think the only way it potentially does matter is if it got guys who otherwise may have been a little lackadaisical in their preparation to buckle down and end up at the end of the road having a better night than they otherwise would have had.
Yeah, I guess my point is it might happen. And Andy Reid is basically, if he does make a big deal of it or even mention it to his team or in this press conference, I doubt he thinks, okay, here's my plan. I am going to say this, and 53 guys in my locker room, or even 5, are going to work extra hard this week to get ready. The point I'm making is I doubt that happens, but why not do it? Because it might happen. It might lead somebody to work hard. I don't know. But at the end of the day, I've seen too many of these things. And then on Sunday when the game starts and they play the game, nobody talks about it after the game because it doesn't matter.
What does matter is the fact that the Raiders have already beaten the Kansas City Chiefs. They came up with a defense that was able to at least hold the Chiefs' offense just enough in check with only 32 points. And that's the challenge. That's the game. You're not going to shut down the Kansas City Chiefs. You just have to come up with a way to outscore them. In recent weeks, it's been more ground and pound for the Las Vegas Raiders. It was Derek Carr cutting it loose for 347, 3 touchdowns against 1 interception back in Week 5. Peter, it's funny because I spoke to Jeff Heath, who had the 1 interception, the only interception of Patrick Mahomes the entire year. And he was like, he didn't want to tell me what they did. He didn't want to get too far. I asked him for some specifics of what you did to slow down the Chiefs. Well, we have to play them again. Smart move by Jeff Heath. But, the Chiefs are going to have access to the film, obviously. They've been studying it. They see what the Raiders tried to do. I can't imagine that you can shut down or at least slow down just enough the Kansas City offense twice. And there's also, I think, a responsibility of the Kansas City defense to not give up 40.
Yeah, I think one of the things you're going to see in this game, Mike, that maybe you didn't see enough of, I think there's going to be more pressure on Derek Carr in this game because Derek Carr is more comfortable with Gruden now. I think he's got almost a devil-may-care thought about his job and his life because he understands how hard it is to play quarterback for John Gruden. So I think the Chiefs want to make Derek Carr uncomfortable, more uncomfortable than he was in the first game. And on the other side, I think one of the things that Patrick Mahomes has to view going into this game is this team has got the kind of speed that was drafted to stop me. Everybody in the AFC West, you look at what Denver has done in the draft. You look at what Mike Mayock has done in his draft, and you basically say that they are drafting people to disrupt Patrick Mahomes and to keep up offensively with the explosive Kansas City Chiefs. And that's why, to me, be physical with Henry Ruggs and put more pressure on Derek Carr. That, to me, is the formula for the Kansas City defense in this game.
Yeah, they have to do something different than what they did last time, or it won't matter how many points they score if they can't slow down the Raiders' offense. And that Raiders' offense, as I mentioned, we have seen far more ground and pound recently, and that seems to be a formula that they've embraced. Last week you had over 100 yards for Josh Jacobs. Devontae Booker had, I think, close to 90 yards rushing. Derek Carr had 154 yards passing. And, we saw that against Cleveland as well. Now, that was a windy day in Cleveland when that occurred. But the best way to outscore the Chiefs' offense is to keep them off the field. And if the new formula for the Raiders is ball control, clock management, frustrate Patrick Mahomes, make him stand on the sideline drinking Gatorade, as Sims likes to say, we could see something that has far fewer than 72 combined points this time around.
I think it will be a lower scoring game. And I also think that Patrick Mahomes, Last night coming into that game, the one thing I was thinking about Russell Wilson was everybody in the world is saying, well, now he's a turnover machine. He's not the MVP anymore. Russell Wilson, I think, really loves those moments. And he absolutely loves coming out in a game when everybody said, well, what color jersey you throwing it to tonight, Russell? And so you saw what happened last night. With the exception of some sloppy penalties, Russell Wilson played regardless of what the numbers said, he played a really good, really efficient, smart football game and did everything he had to do to win. In my opinion, look at the Super Bowl in the middle of the fourth quarter. Chiefs down by 10 points. At the time, Mike, and I remember saying this after the game to Andy Reid, if the game was 50 minutes long, my go to the game was going to be Patrick Mahomes. And he turned it around. He took it on his shoulders. He said, we are not losing this game. He comes to the sidelines. He said, do we have time to run wasp? And Eric Bieniemy says it to Andy, and Andy figures it out. Mike Kafka is there, the quarterback coach, and they all say, okay, let's run two-jet chip wasp. 44 yards later, the game has totally been turned around with that pass to Tyreek Hill up the left seam. And so to me, I look at Patrick Mahomes today thinking about this game on Sunday and thinking that that's not going to happen again. We're going to win this game. Will it matter? I think some of that really does matter. I think it matters a heck of a lot more than what direction a bus took when they left Arrowhead Stadium a month or so ago.
One of the other issues that's going to matter is the COVID issues the Raiders are dealing with, again, just like the last time they were due to play on Sunday Night
defense,
Football, where the offensive line was gone. Now the defense is grossly undermanned this week during practice. The players, most of them, except for Cleveland Farrell, who's positive for COVID-19, all the others were close contacts. They won't be back until the weekend. The Chiefs got, as of last night, their two starting tackles back from the COVID-19 reserve list, Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz. But, to echo the point we discussed earlier, the NFL doesn't care. You got to get your guys ready, and you got to go play, and it's next man up if you don't have enough players because guys are on the COVID-19 reserve list. But that definitely is going to affect the Raiders' defense come Sunday night. All right, earlier in the day on Sunday, it will be the Tennessee Titans at the Baltimore Ravens, a rematch of the division round playoff game from the Saturday night last year when the Titans went in and ended the 14-2 season for Baltimore. Here's Lamar Jackson, the Ravens quarterback and reigning MVP, on whether he views this as a revenge game.
A lot of fans feel that going against the Titans again and what happened in the playoff game, that this is a revenge game. Does that game factor into this game at all?
That it's not a revenge game. The game is over with. It was last year. We just fell short. Can't do anything about it. We just going into this game trying to be 7-3. That's all. We ain't looking into it like a revenge game.
Yeah, and I never get this idea of revenge. Revenge for what? It'd be different if somebody from the Titans kneecapped Lamar Jackson on the way to the locker room after the game, right? That's when you want revenge. All the Titans did was show up and try to win a football game. And the Ravens let them win. Not intentionally, but there's no reason to want revenge. I know that can be a motivator as well. That can get guys fired up. That can get them to do all the things they need to do in the week preceding the game so they're ready to perform at the highest possible levels. But, Peter, the Titans just flat out kicked their butts last year. And it doesn't matter this time around. What matters this time around is whoever loses this is in trouble. That's what matters. The Titans at 6-3. They've lost 3 of their last 4 after starting 5-0. The Ravens now have more losses this year than they had all of last year. Whoever loses this game falls to 6-4 and has to start worrying about whether or not they're going to be in the playoffs. When we assumed both teams would be back, one of these teams may not be, especially if it's the Ravens, because then they got the Steelers on Thursday night. And the division may already be lost. The question is, can you hang on to a wild card spot?
I think the most worrisome thing if I'm John Harbaugh, and if I'm Greg Roman, quite honestly, is not necessarily the inconsistency of Lamar Jackson. And that would worry me. but it's just the fact that the last 2 weeks, when they have been very shaky on offense, have been the worst 2 weeks of the year for the running game. This is supposed to be the best running game in football. And the last 2 weeks, they've run for 110 and 115 yards. They've averaged 3.4 yards a carry over the last 2 weeks. Not good enough, not even close to being good enough. You're going to have to run the ball and run the ball successfully against, against the Tennessee Titans to have a chance to win.
And that comes after the 265 yards they put up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in a game that they somehow lost. And I know the Ravens believe that they kicked the Steelers' butts in that game, but it doesn't matter. The only stat that matters is points scored versus points allowed. And, it was a much easier road for the Steelers in the 3 games between first and second Ravens game. It's been much more difficult and challenging for the Ravens. And it just feels like they're limping into these 2 critical games. Sunday against the Titans, Thursday against the Steelers. I mean, they could be 7-5 by the time we get to next Friday, and that's the one thing that is both fascinating and potentially depressing about short week football. From a Sunday morning, by Friday, you could pick up 2 wins, you could pick up 2 losses. And this time of year, you pick up 2 losses, you may be cooked if you're the Ravens. And so this is a sneaky, huge game because it's going to resonate beyond this Sunday. And if the Titans should lose it, if they can't rediscover what they were doing right earlier this year, and I don't understand why they've gotten away from giving the ball to Derrick Henry as much as they did. Ryan Tannehill was explaining it earlier this week about why they've deliberately reduced his touches. Well, they were 5-0 when he was getting all the touches. They're 1-3 since they have begun to consciously limit the opportunities for Derrick Henry. I mean, look at that. The total yards per game down more than 100, Peter. The passing yards down dramatically. The points per game down more than 10. They need to get this figured out. A team that looked like a juggernaut not that long ago is now one of these teams where you're like, hey, you know what? You may not make the playoffs either.
I think it all starts with, before the season, losing the right tackle, Jack Conklin, in free agency to Cleveland, and now losing the left tackle, Taylor Lewan, in the middle of this big slump. And so now you're playing basically your backup tackles at each tackle spot, and you're asking the offense to be as efficient or more as it was when you had 2 standard bearers at tackle. You don't have that anymore. And so it's just like what the Dallas Cowboys found out. When you take away 3 or 4 of your great offensive linemen and you throw guys out there, Ezekiel Elliott's going to average 3.8 yards a carry. Now, there's a lot about Ezekiel Elliott's game this year I don't like, but clearly he's at a huge disadvantage without that line. And I believe that Ryan Tannehill is at a disadvantage with the line being lessened in quality. And look, a month ago or so, we were all talking about, I know, I was at the front of the line. Ryan Tannehill, this is who he is. This is the real Ryan Tannehill. Over the last 16 games, he's the leading quarterback in passer rating, yards per carry, or yards per attempt, all that. But now we're seeing what happens when he doesn't have his full complement of skill players up front. And I'm calling those 2 tackles skill players because for them, their quickness and lateral movement really were that of skill players.
I mean, this is just one of the realities of football that drives a lot of people crazy. When a team is firing on all cylinders offensively, the people who are getting the statistics are the ones who get the praise. We never stop to say, hey, that great game by Derrick Henry was brought to you by great blocking up front. We heap the praise on the guy that actually runs the football. And then when we flip it around and all of a sudden he's not playing well, the offensive line stinks. Well, let's remember that the next time the offensive line is playing really well and give those guys more credit for allowing great players to do great things while they continue to toil in anonymity. Great game coming in the late afternoon window. Cowboys, Vikings was the marquee matchup back in April for Week 11 at 4:25 p.m. Eastern. Now, not. it's Packers. Colts slid into that time spot by the NFL a couple of weeks ago. A great decision by the powers that be, because the Packers at 7-2, the Colts at 6-3. This is a great, this is one of those, it feels like it should happen more than once every 4 years, right? To your idea that when they add the 17th game, maybe Packers Colts should happen more than once every 4 years. And I like the idea of Aaron Rodgers and company going to Indianapolis with a Colts team that continues to be, I think, a little underrated. I look at them as up and down. And I'm like, hey, they're 6-3, and they were pretty good last Thursday night. And, they can hold their own with that defense against the Green Bay Packers. And we've seen the Packers struggle to develop energy, especially at home with no one in the stands. Well, there'll be people in the stands on Sunday in Indianapolis, and I don't know if that gets them to perform a little more efficiently and effectively right out of the gates. But this is not going to be an easy one for the Packers. This is not check the W and move on. The Colts know what's in front of them. They know the opportunity they have with the Titans slumping a bit. And this is a chance for the Colts to really grab everyone's attention that they are a team that needs to be taken seriously.
This reminds me of the old game when we've talked about this before, when the Giants played the Bills in the Super Bowl in 1990, and the Giants had a radical upset of the 49ers, kicked 5 field goals to make it to that Super Bowl against Buffalo. Buffalo blew out Oakland 51-3, in the AFC Championship game. And right after the game, Bill Parcells, the Giants coach, looked at Ron Earhart, his offensive coordinator, and said, shorten the game, play clock ball. In other words, keep the ball out of Jim Kelly's hands. And Mike, you know what? The more things change, the more they stay the same. 30 years later, if I am Matt LaFleur, I am being very, very cautious this week in telling my team, take advantage of your chances. You might only get 8 possessions, maybe 9, because I think the way the Colts are going to play this game, you've seen Nyheim Hines come out of nowhere. I think 4th round pick in 2018, and now more than you could have imagined with Phillip Rivers as the quarterback. It's the running game, with Nyheim Hines and Jonathan Taylor particularly. Basically, those are the guys who, in my opinion, are going to tell the tale of this game for the Indianapolis Colts. If they have 30 rushes on Sunday at the end of this game, I'll say that the Colts will win this game, because that'll mean they would have 1 time of possession, say 33, 35 rushes. They would have 1 time of possession and kept the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands.
Boy, there was a time not that long ago where Jim Irsay, the owner of the Colts, was touting Marlon Mack as the next great running back in the NFL. He had that ruptured Achilles tendon back in week 1, and they've got the revolving door going between Hines and Taylor and Jordan Wilkins. And that when you talk about contracts for running backs and just balancing that it's very delicate. If you have that star running back, the fans fall in love with him, and you can't let him go. When you spread it around, you can let one go, and then the next one that you draft comes in, and it just makes so much more sense. If you can make it work, they're making it work in Indianapolis, where you've got 3 guys who share the load. They don't seem to be selfish. I tried to ask Nyheim Hines about that last week. I got the impression these guys are fine with each other. There isn't that greediness that would creep into it. They take the opportunities they can get, and they make the most out of them. But you're right, Peter. If the Colts can slow the game down, frustrate Aaron Rodgers, make him press a little bit more when he is on the field, and that defense is very good. And, we get back to where's the help for Aaron Rodgers. Now, may have Alan Lazard back this week. Marquez Valdez-Scantling did very well last week with 149 yards and a long touchdown against Jacksonville. I wonder how much of that near miss against Jacksonville operates as a kick in the ass to the Packers for this week, which is a big, they're holding on to the 1 seed, and that 1 seed can go away very quickly. They don't have to worry about anyone really breathing down their necks in the division, but they do have to worry about getting the bye week versus not getting the bye week, and that should be all the reason that they need to try to handle the Colts. And just remind everyone, hey, they're, the NFC West, you guys can fight with each other about who the champion is, and Saints, Bucks, have fun. we'll see you at Lambeau Field come mid-January.
The other thing, Mike, is, I think that Darius Leonard and his friends on that Indianapolis defense, guys like Danico Autry, who are terminally underappreciated. Those guys on that defense are basically saying, this is a huge game for us. We're going to be on national TV. We're going to show America that we're not just, you look at their stats. Their stats are wonderful. 6 of their 9 games, they've held teams under 300 yards. So that's fantastic. But they don't really have the appreciation nationwide that they should as a defense. They come in on Sunday, and if Darius Leonard and Matt Eberflus, the defensive coordinator, if they're hitting the right notes this week as they prepare for this game, they're saying, this is our chance to show everybody that we're not just going to win games and be anonymous. Let's make a name for ourselves this week.
Yeah, and look, the offseason acquisition of DeForest Buckner, they gave up a first-round pick happily to get him and pay him. That has helped solidify the interior defensive line. And then Xavier Rhodes, who they grabbed off the scrap heap, he knows Aaron Rodgers really well. Now, Rodgers knows him well. To me, that's an intriguing matchup. That's a little chess match. Yeah. Who will he cover? He has had a career rebirth in Indianapolis, and he may remember a few things about Rodgers. Rodgers may remember a few things about him. I almost wish this game was in prime time so we could just focus on that and nothing else. That's how big of a game I think this is and how significant it's going to be to the playoff field, Peter, in each conference. And really, if the Colts can pull this one off, then everyone is on notice. They can't claim that they are overlooked and disregarded, and they welcome the Titans to town next week to deliver the potential death blow to Tennessee.
It's the end of this season has so many interesting parts of the schedule. We talked earlier about how, the Arizona Cardinals now in the span of 15 days have to go to Foxborough and East Rutherford. And, you talk about the Indianapolis Colts, and you're absolutely right. In the span of 8 days, they've got 2 monster games. They got Aaron Rodgers, and then they got the Tennessee Titans, for the second time in a couple of weeks. So to me, there's a reason why Howard Katz gets a lot of love from people around the league. And I think it's because he and his scheduling team, Mike North and the other guys on that team, do such a really good job in trying to figure out through the course of the season. And they're figuring out in April, Mike. But they figure out in the course of the season, when do we want games to be played and how do we want to stack them? And, they're already thinking about some of the games, later in the season that might have to be flexed. So, and I don't think there will be more than 1, maybe 2 of those. And then in the last week of the season, some fantastic potential matchups in week 17 to put on NBC on Sunday night, assuming, of course, that there isn't a week 18. And that, of course, would throw everything up in the air again.
All I want for Christmas is for all the games to be played. Here's hoping that the NFL can keep rocketing toward these great games to come as the season reaches, hopefully, a crescendo on week 17 with no week 18, ideally.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.